we are going back to basics with this mani to do a simple dip mani and simple stamping over it. What's up, nail crew? It's Nicole, your fellow nail obsessed DIYer. I wanted to give everybody a ton of tips to do a simple mani with a little bit of flair of easy stamping. And a lot of you have been asking me about stamping, but you're not sure like where to start and how to do it with dip liquids, and you're, afraid that you're not going to be able to do it. So we're going to talk about how to do the dips first, then we're going to jump into an easy stamp. When you're using a flake dip powder, and I do this technique with flakes, foils, and glitters, you want to make sure that you're laying your nail flat onto the dip powder. So I like to put mine in these dip cups. I use these cute little dip cups from SJ3 Designs. I am absolutely obsessed. And I pour my dip powder into the dip cups, and then I shake it up before each dip. So when you're dipping, like say a chunky glitter, you don't want to pick up a ton of chunky pieces on your first dip. But when you're doing flakes or foils, especially flakes, you really want to get as many of those flakes on all of your layers of the dips as you possibly can. I have builder gel down as my base on my natural nails, so I only need to do 2 dips of the actual color, and then I do 1 dip of clear. And I do this regardless of what kind of dips I'm using, what brand I'm using. So to me, I expect that all of my dips should work how I want them to in 2 dips. I know some companies make their dips to really need more than 2 layers to build up the color, but for me, my expectation of a dip powder is that it better be giving me the results that I want and the look that I want in 2 layers, because that's all I'm doing with it since I use builder gel as a base. And I know a lot of people use clear dip powder as a base, so they don't like to do more than 2 to 3 max dips of the color. And that's what I go with pretty much all the time. Every once in a while, I'll do a 3rd dip, of a color if I mess something up really bad and have to do it. But I would say 99% of the time, I'm only doing 2 layers of the dip powder. So a trick that I absolutely love using is putting a piece of tape on my middle finger of my opposite hand that I'm dipping, and then use that washi tape or like masking tape, painter's tape, something like that, to press the glitters, flakes, or foils down. And what I tend to do is I'll usually dip thumb through pinky, or, I'll dip whatever the flakes or foils or glitters are, give them a little bit of time to dry before I start to push them down, because I've noticed that if I push them down right away, a little bit will stick to the tape, and I don't want that, right? Like, you want to be using that tape to press them down so that they lay flat and that your nails aren't thick. That's why you usually see me maybe going back through 2 nails or 3 or 4. I rarely go nail by nail pressing it down unless it's such a chunky glitter that you have to press it down right from the start. Or sometimes I just forget and start pressing something down before I feel like I should have. Or if I've taken a little break and that nail has dried a little bit more, then I'll start to press it down. Something else that you want to be doing, and this is regardless of the kind of dip powder that you're using, when you're doing a dip close to your cuticle, you want to push them back before each dip. That's going to help you get the dip liquids as close as you possibly can to your cuticle without flooding them. Something else that really, really helps when you're dipping to keep your layers thin is to wipe off a majority of the dip liquid on the inside of the bottle before you even go to put it down on your nail. So the goal always is to keep our layers as thin as possible. It is so much better for the longevity of your nails to do a higher number of thin layers than a lower number of thick layers. So you're better off doing 5 thin layers of dip powder than 3 thick layers. And what tends to happen when you do thick layers is your nails tend to chip and crack and lift off a lot faster, versus when you do thinner layers, they tend to last a lot longer. They tend to chip less and crack less. And that also has to do with the quality of the liquids and the dips that you're using. So that's something else that definitely plays a role. Another thing that I love doing after every single dip is I take some kind of either pointy nail tool or an orange wood stick to trace around my cuticles after any of the dips that are close to my skin. So this is just going to keep the dip base and any of the dip powder, it's going to keep it off my skin. And if you leave the dip powder and dip liquids like stuck on your skin, your manis are going to lift faster. And I know for most of you watching, you want your manis to last for a long time. So a lot of us who are doing our nails, for content creation, we're not keeping our manis on long. Me personally, I keep mine on about 4 to 7 days, but I know a lot of people who pop them off within a day or two. So when you're listening to somebody's advice on how to do your nails, make sure that they're giving you like the best options for longevity, not like content creation where we want, where we use peel base and our manis come off a couple days later. I always try to give everybody tips and tricks for getting your nails to last as long as possible, since I know that's most people's goal, right? Like you're doing your nails at home and you want them to last a long time. Now, sometimes what happens is then you really get into doing your nails and you start using peel base like I do, and then you want to do your nails way more often. I actually had to back off on how much I was doing my nails. I want to say it was fall of 2022. I had contact dermatitis on a couple of my fingers on my left hand, I believe it was. I was obsessively trying to figure out how to do Gel X, and I kept like cutting them off and retrying and e-filing, and it was a disaster, and I ended up with contact dermatitis. So now I wear the gloves all the time. That's why you see me in the videos even when I'm not using gels. I still wear gloves regardless of what I'm doing. I want to keep as much of the product off my hands, off my skin as I possibly can. So once you're done dipping your layers of the color, then you go through and you want to top with clear dip powder. And the reason that I always do that whenever I'm using dip liquids is that's going to protect your color. So it doesn't matter what kind of dip you're using, flake, foil, shimmer, glitter, any of those. Using clear as your last layer allows you to buff and file and shape really nicely and not mess with your beautiful color that you just spent so long doing. The way that you can tell if your nails are ready to file and buff and shape is you want to tap on them, and if they make like a hard tapping sound, then you know they're ready. If they don't make like this tapping sound and it sounds almost muffled, then you know that your dips haven't been hardened by the activator, so you definitely don't want to try filing or buffing or shaping it, because you will most likely file down into your dip, right? Since it's not hard enough, it isn't ready to be filed and buffed. The longer that you practice doing your nails, the easier that it's going to get. And I know that sounds so obvious, but when I first started doing my nails, I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, I have to do so much work to get them to look nice. This is crazy. But it really does get easier the more you do them. And then you're going to eventually get to the point where you want to try all these other designs. I mean, maybe that's what a lot of us end up doing. I wanted to show you real quick how I get my nice cuticle lines. I am not the best at dipping perfectly rounded cuticle lines, so I take an e-file and I go through and clean up my cuticle lines. I call it like crisping my cuticle lines, and I put it right underneath the magnifying glass so you could like really see what I'm doing. Now this bit that I'm using, it was the Pana Extra Fine Barrel bit, and it is a very sharp, so you have to be really careful. Once I'm done with that, I wipe off my nails with isopropyl alcohol. Then I'm ready to go into my stamping. So let me give you some really easy stamping tips. Okay, first of all, you don't have to rush. If you mess up the stamp, it's okay. Just don't stamp it on your nail. You saw me right there. I wiped off my stamping plate with acetone because I didn't stamp it right the first time. I was just trying to pick up a flower, do like a very simple design to get myself back into stamping, after all of my recent medical issues. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, you just have to go back a couple of videos and I talk about it a whole bunch more. So that's the nice thing that I absolutely love about stamping. If you mess up your stamp when you pick it up, it's okay. Wipe off your plate with acetone on a cotton ball and just try again. And that's what I was doing here. You want to put enough stamping polish where your image is covered and not so much that it's like massively flooding the plate, but you need enough to actually cover the image. And then you don't want to do more than like 1 to 2 scrapes. I personally like to use a thicker scraper card. It just really helps me like get the excess polish off and scrape down. You're scraping down at like a 45-degree angle. I think that is the correct angle. I'm so bad at math. I'm an accountant, but don't tell anybody I'm bad at math. Anyways, you want to scrape down hard, and that will allow you to get a majority of the polish off and then just leave it in the image. And you roll the stamper in the opposite direction that you scraped. So all those will help you. And I would say start with just some really basic images, one color, to give yourself some confidence. And if you need to, you can practice on like some full cover tips or swatch sticks. Now, here's the trick that I do for getting my stamps to last underneath a dip liquid top coat that they don't smear. I use Maniology's smudge-free top coat over my stamps, and I make sure that the entire nail is covered, and I even make sure that I cover my nail tips with the smudge-free top coat. And I let it dry at least 5 minutes, preferably 10. So when I touch the smudge-free top coat, it has to be 100% dry. And then I can just go in and do my top coating like I normally would with the activator and top coat. Now, something that you have to really make sure that you do on the nails that you stamped, when you're putting the activator over top of your nails, you really want to float it over. Like normally you can press it into your nail harder, but when you're doing it over the stamps, just make sure you float. I float both layers of top coat over my nails too, regardless of the brand. It just helps me not to contaminate my top coat brushes. Now you're ready to learn some harder stamping. So check out this next video and we'll get into more stamping lessons. Thanks for joining me today, Nail Crew.